Hi, Larry.
Lucera, hi, how are you?
I have been looking forward to this conversation all day. Um,
Oh, thank you.
yeah, I've actually been looking forward to it since I read the article. And
Mhm.
I thought maybe I'd start by giving some context, um,
Please.
just for me, like where I came to. So your article was published on your newsletter, February
Mhm.
15th. And I remember going through the article. And then I saw this title, Let's Get Real and Authenticity. And it was almost like I just wasn't ready to look at that word because it used to be my favorite word. 10, maybe 10, no more than that, maybe like 15, between 15 and 20 years ago, it was
Mhm.
my favorite word. And I've stopped using it. I sort of turned away from it because it just felt as though every time I encountered that word, whether it was through a brand or somebody describing something or somebody describing somebody else, it never felt that that was what was being represented. So I almost had this, well, not almost, I did have this turning away from the word. So fast forward to this winter, I see your article that day, I turn away from it. Maybe a month later, I'm on a lunch break. I have 30 minutes to have lunch in a work environment that felt very rigid for me.
Yeah.
And I decided I wanted to go back to find that article. And I Googled it on my phone and I pulled it up and I started to read it and I was like, oh my gosh, somebody is saying what I've been feeling for such a long time about this inconsistency with the word. And
Mhm.
you sort of went through, it was a short enough piece that it captured the splitting of how this word doesn't really match so much of what we see nowadays. And it was an invitation for me to revisit the word. And I
Mhm.
wanted to do that today with Beaucheval Conversations because Beaucheval really is built around authenticity and sincerity and genuineness as much as in every sense of the word, even if it means looking at what we're not doing very well. And
Mhm.
so I thought this would be a nice way to have a conversation to reorient ourselves, myself and perhaps others, to the word and learn a bit about why you wrote that article. But I thought, first off, maybe you could tell those people who are watching and listening just a
Mhm.
little bit about your professional background and work that you're passionate about doing.
I'd be happy to do that. Yes, I am. I am very passionate about what I do, which really revolves around all things having to do with identity, human identity, and organizational identity. And I've been at this my entire career for almost 40 years. Um, And in the spirit of authenticity, people say, well, how did you get into this? And, you know, is it academic? Did you study? Whatever. I said, no, it's a very personal experience for me, which is that when I was 4 years old, I was in the hospital. I was in there because my eyes were crossed and my parents wanted to have my eyes fixed. And long story short is I remember the event. I recall being strapped down to the table. I recall the bright lights over my head, and I'm 4 years old. So I was utterly panicked. And my parents were not in the operating room at the time. They didn't allow parents in at the time. But at a certain moment, in the midst of panic, I asked myself a question inside. And the question was, what is so wrong with me that I must be changed from who I am? And in that moment, I had literally an extraordinary awareness, a consciousness about being alive. And then everything went black. But ever since that experience in the hospital at 4, matters of identity have been the governing force in my life. And the connection between identity and authenticity is, for me, the two are utterly interdependent. I don't know how one can be totally authentic if you don't really know who you are. And so that's been my mantra and my objective and my passion is to help inspire authenticity in people and companies by helping them tap into their fundamental sense of identity and who they are and how they create value in the world.
That's beautiful. At 4 years old, that's quite impactful. And that sort of was your trajectory to continue that. Was it sort of in your mind as you went through life and all stages of life? I mean, to find
It
work where you would
was
reconnect back with that?
eventually. I mean, it took me a long time. I didn't come out of the surgery with an awareness of what had happened. It took me many, many years, frankly, of therapy and self-awareness. And just, I was very fortunate in a lot of ways to be able to figure this all out, but not until I was actually into my mid-20s. And then it all began to come together. And that's when I felt like I was on a rocket ship, which is to say that my world and my life and the work that I do in the world was going to be grounded in all things having to do with identity, clarifying identity, living through one's identity, and staying true to it.
Well, identity is a big word in my life too, and probably for a lot of the people who are going to be watching this, because many of the people that I know have grown up around the world, have grown up straddling different cultures, have migrated through different iterations of living in different cultures, societies, socioeconomic backgrounds. I mean, so many versions of identity that it's always in our minds all the time. So
Mm.
I'm sure we'll continue to touch on it a bit in our conversation.
Good, good.
Um, so I'm going to read a little bit about just a few lines from the article, the beginning of it that
Sure.
struck me, just to give people. So it was
Mm.
author. It says authenticity. There isn't much of it out there these days. Maybe there is among animals who don't know anything else. They never learned how to fake it. And yet authenticity remains a popular idea. I'm skipping a bit through stuff.
Mm.
It's easier to promote it than to live it. What made you write this article?
having having worked with so many organizations over the years and observing the inauthentic authenticity that exists out there in the business world to a large degree. You look at, companies, as I quote in the article, like Coke, with the line about what is it?
Real thing. It's the real thing.
Yeah, the real thing. It's the real thing. Well, that's bull. I don't know that it's the real thing. Maybe it will be, maybe it isn't, but they're trying to promote it as the real thing. And there are so many examples. Wrangler has their genuine article, or GM had genuine GM parts. Well, they may be genuine GM parts, but they may not necessarily be genuine in the larger sense of the word. So authenticity is a term of art that has been hijacked, if you will, by even well-meaning institutions.
Hmm.
But it doesn't mean that they know what they're really saying. They're just promoting, as I said, the idea, because people, and this is what's important, people like you and me and the folks listening in or watching, we want the real thing.
Yeah. Yeah.
We yearn for it because there's so little of it in the world, especially today with
Yeah.
social media. My gosh, it's
I
bereft.
find there's a lot that is, and I'm going to describe it from my own felt sense of
Mm-hmm.
where I started to turn away from the work. It was just so confusing. You're telling me something, you're showing me something, but
Mm-hmm.
inside of myself, I can feel that that's just not what it is. There's something that is not genuine about it,
Mm-hmm.
and so it's almost like, and I don't know if you felt this, and other people listening have felt this too, but just your system feels confused and frustrated and sort of like you're being sold something, but it's not something, or somebody's maybe presenting themselves online in a particular way, and then you meet them and it's not the right. It's completely inauthentic, and it just messes with your system. Well, it did mess with mine.
Mm.
And so I'm wondering, in your experience, where did this all go? Ching, 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 all over the place. That where did it all go askew?
Probably long before you and I were on this earth. You know, the whole notion of authenticity has been with us, I think, forever.
Yeah.
It's not a new idea,
But
and
where
it,
did it become so laced with trickery? And like you said, I don't think it's all the time that it's intentional.
no,
But I feel a lot of the time, and maybe I'm throwing in another word here, but I think authenticity and sincerity for me somehow go together. And I've just felt that for the most part, there is the representation of that hasn't been what I sense back. So where did it all just sort of accelerate to be this? Yeah, trickery is kind of the word
well,
that
I
I would.
think, you know, I think the maybe incomplete but accurate answer would be that um, as I said, the hijacking of and the use of the word authenticity and the idea of it being basically taken advantage of or exploited has occurred consistently in lockstep with the sophistication of our media environment. So way back in the day, and you know, in the agricultural revolution, the industrial revolution, when people had different, you know, mindsets, they were doing different things. There was no internet. There was certainly no social media. And even the notion of advertising way back in the 20th century, which is when it was founded, the industry, um, that's what triggered it. You know, well, let's create an image. You know, if Coke says, create an image for us that, you know, communicates X, Y, and Z, the ad agency would say, well, sure, we'll create an image. But it lacked, what did it lack? Authenticity. It was
Because it
just,
was driven by a different motive?
yeah, it was, well, it was driven by the need to make money.
Mhm.
But so it was largely a fabrication. And again, occasionally it wasn't, but more often than not that it was. So you go from advertising in the classic sense to um, here's the internet, which expands everything, you know, exponentially, and then here's social media, which multiplies the exponential impact of the internet, and
Yeah.
suddenly everybody is effectively faking it because they want to be, I mean, this, you know, this is a very sore subject for me because you want to be seen as perhaps something you're not. So I just think the whole thing has grown, as I said, exponentially
Yeah.
for over many, many, many decades. And now it's become, you know, like crazy. But full circle, the reason the word has become renewed in its meaning and significance, because I think people recognize that this is just crazy. You know, it's gone too far. At
But
least
I
from
hadn't even Googled. I have not touched that word. I have not.
mm,
It's insane, really, and how like really 15-year period. So when I opened up my YouTube channel, I'm serious. I opened
yeah.
up my YouTube and I put in authenticity and started to look and see, wow, this word has it's been around. Like I've clearly been
Mm,
ignoring
okay.
hearing it and seeing how it has resurfaced recently. And a lot of
Mm,
that conversation is around the authenticity of our emotions and connecting that back to our, you know, our initial moments in
mhm,
our parenting and being able to express ourselves and the nurturing environment that we may or may not have had. So it seems to now have gone into that direction of the expression of real and genuine. But I was surprised to see that it has stuck around and it has of lately sort of seems to be having a bit more of a um, resurgence. And so, with that in mind, as you work with companies, and maybe in a bit we can also talk about individuals because I
of
love the
course,
book, The
of
Identity
course.
Code, and there's so much of this that we can put on companies, but ultimately we are all our own individuals who need to figure ourselves out because then we are part of a culture of a company, right?
Okay.
But perhaps when we look at what companies or business owners could be doing to really check their blind spots in the use of that word and in the representation of that word, what advice would you give to
Well, I
that?
think, yeah, good question. I think there's a lot going on today um, that is beginning to move the needle in the right direction. So, as you know, I'm an author, and I'm a member of and an author of a group called Barrett Kohler. There was a webinar yesterday with some new authors who are being put out there, and they're asking some of the established authors like me to listen in and make comments. One of the books that is being published just came out 2 weeks ago or 3 weeks ago is called The Generous Leader.
The
And
generous leader?
generous, yeah,
Okay.
generous,
Yep.
as in generous. And
Mhm.
the gentleman who wrote it, Joe Davis, whom I know, um, is very, very sincere, a very authentic man. And he wrote it not to make a bunch of money, but because he felt this was important and given his career and the legacy he wants to leave. So there's a lot of this coming up, which is what does it take to be a good leader today? And it doesn't have to be, a $100 billion company. It could be a $10 million company. You still have the same needs. You have the same people you're trying to, have follow you. And the idea of being an authentic person and implicitly showing some vulnerability, being able to say, I don't know, but we'll find out, or let's figure this out together. Those are all traits of the emergent modern leader and are very, very well accepted and sought after. So the word that we haven't brought out yet, but I want to present it now, and it's fundamental to the notion of authenticity, is integrity, which is to say, you won't have any integrity if you can't be authentic, and you will undermine any sense of integrity if post up being authentic when you're really not. I mean, that'll work totally against you. So I am a big fan of integrity, and not just you know saying what you mean, but in the larger sense of wholeness, of soundness, of being and living who you are in a comprehensive way. Doesn't mean perfect, but it does mean
No.
having courage. It means not being afraid to let people see you as who you are. Somebody whom I used to work with would say to people who just met me, they'd say, with Larry, what you see is what you get. There's no other angle or side or whatever.
And
That's
I think
integrity.
sometimes that's a process, even
Mm,
if people are in, I mean, for some, it's a
mm,
process. If that is the intention of how you would like to conduct your life, just the willingness to know that it can be an unfolding and an unlearning, vulnerability to get to that place where you can
yeah.
be much more authentic to yourself first, because I think that that's where it starts. You've got to have some sense of understanding it within yourself before you start pointing fingers at other people, and know that, yes, it doesn't always mean being right and good. It can be a a winding journey, but I think
Hmm.
um, the day to day of, am I being true to myself and my actions, and my desires, is a
Hmm.
work in progress.
Hmm. It
Yeah,
is a work in progress, and that's fine as long as you're making progress.
yeah,
That's what
yeah,
matters.
yeah. Well, in the work with that I do with horses, I
Hmm.
often say, when that moment where the horse is often choosing to turn towards or come towards the human,
Hmm.
I describe it as the word sometimes vulnerability is that moment where we're being very clear with what's on the inside and what's on the outside. And with vulnerability, it doesn't necessarily mean saying everything out loud to everybody everywhere. It's just the integrity.
Right.
And I find that horses find that they're drawn to a human because we don't have an agenda. The agenda is not um, hidden when we're
Mm.
being vulnerable. It's very clear. And prey animals seem to find that very attractive. Um, so a little bit about the individual. You know, I know in the identity code you um, walk people through the steps of how to uncover who you are and what makes you sort of tick and what makes you
Mhm.
thrive in life. Um, what would you say to people who are out there, even just perhaps going to work every day, slogging it, you know, figuring out who they are on social media, frustrated with the way the world is? What would you say in terms of identity for them?
They're missing the boat. Um, I'm not here to, I'm not a proselytizer. I only work with people who want to work with me. Um, so there are many more who don't know I exist, and B, don't care, which is fine with me. Um, you know what I feel, Loser? I feel sad for people who are obsessed with creating avatars or creating, in quotes, identities that may or may not align with who they really are, but who do it because they feel that's, influencers, for example. Those is how I'm going to make money. I'm going to get all these people
Right.
to follow me. Um,
And to be
and
honest, I don't think I doubt people who are of that demographic are going to find their way to listen to this conversation. But I think the people just be, but I
right.
think there are so many people who are stuck in jobs where they are trying to be, or you know, or looking for a relationship, or they're just in that zone of still struggling,
Hmm.
and they're turned off by this word, and we're just like a little bit more enrichment into how they can, you know, be more authentic in their own life. And so what would how would you help them to sort of find their way to having a life that is um, much more true to what they would want to experience?
If they're open to it, um, again, I'm inclined to say, well, read my book or go to my website or but that'd be nice. But most people or many people won't have the time or the inclination to do it. I think the first thing you need to do is suspend disbelief. You need to stop in your tracks, be still in your heart, and acknowledge that maybe there's more for you to learn. Maybe there is more to figure out than what you have figured out so far. Even that is a step forward. The ability to stop, to open yourself up to the prospect that there is more to discover about oneself. It's very, very difficult to do this work alone.
Mm,
Um, it's like, trying to be your own therapist is very, very hard. So, being practical, if somebody's in this zone we're talking about, find a friend, a really good friend, somebody you feel utterly comfortable talking to, and just begin by talking to them about how you feel uncomfortable or how you feel that there's more to learn, um, with the intent of getting them to say to you, tell me more. So what you're looking to do is open up a conversation basically with yourself, but you're working through others as a sounding board whom you trust. That's a very simple way to begin this journey, and it is a journey. It is a journey. And then, it's not that difficult to um, find books or articles that talk about these issues of identity. And there are many, and it's it's all about what you want for yourself. I have
yeah.
recently worked with somebody who wanted to work with me, not because they were looking to change their job or career, which is a lot of the motivation, or become a better leader. This person just really was at a point in his life where he just wanted to find out more. A very curious mind. And that's something else that I would hope people have, to
Mm.
be curious. Be curious and do not be afraid. Here's the bottom line. What you will discover in what I'll call unearthing or clarifying your identity is all good. This is Larry Ackerman's perspective, okay? Your identity is a very powerful positive force. So anything you do to tap into it is for the good. Let me
Might not always be easy.
no, it probably will never be easy, but it's not
Right.
impossible. And that's why I write these, the books.
Yeah.
It is possible to clarify and to embrace your identity and to live through it. And most important, understand your identity is a gift to the world. It's a gift. It's a bridge, a relationship bridge. So the more you can do this work, the stronger your relationships will become. Because you know what you have in doing this work? Authenticity.
Yeah.
People
I'm going to
love.
invite people who are listening to go back to when I asked you the question and you started answering it,
Mm,
with the invitation to be open, um, and to be honest that you don't know what you don't know. I'm going to invite people to go back, and I'll put down in the time code where they can do that, because I think that that
mm.
was so rich. And as you were saying that, I could feel my like chest expanding, because it resonated with me. And I think just the slow pace of that, you hear it once, it might feel good, but I think it's really good to hear these things 2 or 3 times, because they're not part of what we're digesting all day.
Yeah,
So thank you for sharing that.
of course. Consider, the metaphor I might use is you're opening a window and letting in the fresh air. That's what I'm suggesting people do.
And even if there are elements of fear, to know that is also very,
Mm,
very natural.
of
Um,
course.
so if there is fear, that's part of the process,
Yeah,
as well.
that's okay.
Mm.
It's all good.
It's all good, even when it's messy and
Yeah,
it's
yeah,
scary.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
So in the article at the very beginning, and I read that piece where you talk about animals not faking it, and then at the very end again, you
Mm,
mention animals, and I'm
mm.
curious to know whether you were conscious of the fact that you were relating to animals in the beginning, at the end of your piece. And to me, it seems as though you have this space where you are in recognition of animals and nature as being authentic. And I thought, is there something around that that you would like to share?
Yeah, I'm a writer, so I deliberately connect dots. That's what I do. And yeah, I opened with the animal passage and I close with it because I believe it. How can an animal fake it? They're going to do what they're going to do. Like horses. I mentioned to you once before, I had an extraordinary experience, equine experience.
But I
Some
haven't heard it, so maybe you can tell me
Yeah,
and
yeah, yeah.
everyone listening.
So maybe 4 or 5 years ago, I was visiting friends on a farm outside of Cleveland, believe it or not, beautiful farm. And the woman is a therapist, an equine therapist. And my wife and I were there for the weekend, and she has 5 or 6 horses and a donkey, and it's a whole menagerie. It's very cool. And she asked if I was interested in meeting the horses and experiencing some of what she does. I said, absolutely. So we went out to the barn, and I'll fast forward after she kind of told us a little bit about each horse. And she said, you can come up and say hello to them. And she explained how to do it properly and all that. I said, fine. And toward the and maybe 35, 40 minutes into the session, she said, it's okay, go up. She said, Larry, she's looking at me, and I'm probably looking a little weird. She says, go up to the horses and see what happens. I said, okay. So I walk up to the horses slowly, all of them, by the way, they're all sort of right in front of me. And I walk to within maybe 4 feet, 5 feet of them. And they, with no prompting, surround me. They move to like a semicircle around me. I have never felt so protected in my entire life. I'll never forget it. So are animals genuine? Are they authentic? Yes. And in that moment, we were authentic together.
How did you know that you were, where did that sense of protection come from?
Well, first of all, they're large. And, but I could sense their unspoken regard, uh, respect, caring. That's what I took away from that experience. I mean, I don't think horses automatically, sort of align themselves that way and without some connection with the person. And
Absolutely.
it was stunning for me, just stunning. So,
Yeah. And it can look very different for another person. They could have aligned themselves slightly differently. But
yeah,
in that moment, you got what sounds to me that you got what exactly what you were needing and they were sensing.
I did. I was in tears. I was so moved.
Very authentic. Yeah. Yeah. So I've asked you a lot of questions.
Mm.
I'm wondering if you have any questions for me before we wrap up.
Well, yeah, since authenticity is not a word you've allowed yourself to use for 15 years, I guess my question to you is it time to re-up on the use of the word? And if so, in what context?
That's exactly what's been in my mind. And when I do think about it, I get quite emotional. You know, I can feel like the tears behind my eyes a bit. Um, and I'm going to take time to I know that it's already there in the essence of what I do with Beau Cheval and that we all do in the connection with horses and humans collaborating and working together for the human to receive support or to learn how to work through negative emotions or strong emotions,
Mm.
or work through grief, or just feel supported. They're in my mind, every aspect of putting together a program and even my facilitation of a program is around that being very genuine for the horse to be able to express itself and to feel cared for in the moment that it's collaborating with the human, and genuine for the human to feel safe and in a trusted space, physically and emotionally. And then a genuine experience that you just watch unfold between the human and the horse. It's a very beautiful dance to see. And I don't feel that I can do it without being authentic, um, because you really are reading moments and facilitating moments, as they are and guiding, those moments for the human and the horse, for the human to then say, like much like you did, from their own inside, oh, this is what this means to me. So it is in a bow authentic, but I just have not used that word anywhere on my site. I haven't used it in any of my content. And the plan is to revise how I would use it. Um, I
Well,
think it's
let me
more
ask
about
you,
authentic
let me ask
connection.
you this.
Yes.
From everything I know about you and have heard, I mean, it seems to me that you're in a position, given what you do with Bosheval, to help individuals um, get in touch with their own authenticity.
Absolutely. That's the
And
essence of
you
what
ought
I'm
to
doing.
you ought to tell people that. You ought to have
I will
dialogue
now.
around that.
Yeah, yeah, no, and this is why I wanted to have this conversation with you because it's also, for me, it's opening up that space. And I want people to know that this is a word that has meant a lot and is very much foundational to myself and for Beau Cheval. Um, but just like many of us who are struggling with that word, I would want anyone to know, actually, we've actually had a conversation around how it could be quite fraction, all over the place, but that's not our intention here. It
It
really
seems
is
to
to be
me that
genuine.
yeah, that authenticity writ large and deep is a fundamental part of your personal story. And to bring that story to life in the work that you do, I would think would be a very satisfying experience.
And it is. It is. And I'm going to use that word more. And I'm going to, um, this interaction, even just this piece that I read of yours, was that door opening of me getting ready to use this word in my work, in my
Good.
facilitation, and even again in my own personal life. So I have a lot of gratitude to you because I would not have used it if I hadn't if I hadn't read your article. I can guarantee you I would have still been like, nope, no, no, you know.
Well,
Um,
I'm delighted to have been the spark on that fire.
yeah. Oh, it's been lovely talking to you, Larry. And
Likewise.
I think every time that word comes across now, you're just going to be pinging in my mind. So thank you for reintroducing us and having an open conversation. And I would invite others to have an open conversation about whether they are struggling with that word, whether
Good,
it's been conflictual for them as well.
good. That's great.
Thank you very much, Larry.
My pleasure. I've enjoyed your company as always and look forward to you doing wonderful things.
Thank you. You
You're
too.
welcome.